Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our October 14th, 2025 regular meeting of the Board of Directors. Thank you to those attending in person tonight and those staying engaged by watching our recording at a later time, as well as those on Zoom with us tonight. The public is reminded that if they wish to make a community comment, they will need to fill out the speaker form located in the back of the room on the table to my left and turn it in to our board secretary, Kim Coven, seated at the end of our table, also on my left. Community comment will take place during a designated time on our agenda. I want to take a moment to introduce those seated at the table with me tonight. To my right, we have Superintendent Degner, Directors Icestone, Eastham, and Williams. I'm President Malone. And to my left, we have Director Lingo and Board Secretary Coven. With that, we will dive right into our agenda. And the first item will be student representatives, and Tate High submitted a video. So, Board Secretary Coven. I know, because it's a tree. I'm trying to get it. Maybe.
And Tamia and
Anaya from Tate's new media production team.
We had a great start to the school year.
In September, different groups of students went to Lake McBride for School of the Wild. Students built a bench, a campfire, cleared brush, and more. They also had fun fishing and canoeing. At the end of the week, they got to learn about raptors.
students in PE participated in a biking unit completed in collaboration with the Iowa City Bike Library.
Culinary classes made cookies and students volunteered at the free lunch program.
A lot of students have passed their driver's permit test that our TAP specialist has been proctoring.
We had parent-teacher conferences last week.
This week we will have Spirit Week.
We're looking forward to having more celebrations as we finish out first trimester.
Thanks, guys. Toodles.
All right. That was Tate High, and they submit a video because getting here for their representatives is a little bit difficult because they have jobs and some family obligations. So we are thrilled to have our students here with us in person, and we will move on to West High. Waleed and Eddie.
Over the past month, Iowa City High's volleyball and football team has performed great, exceptional performances. Within the district, the volleyball team has 4 wins, 2 of them being against Liberty High and City High. And Liberty and football has been almost undefeated within the season. And we're going to keep that success going on against Prairie this Friday.
Let's turn that 5-1 into a 6-1. Just to name some other accomplishments, in girls tennis, they semifinaled at state, and we currently have 2 debate teams ranked in the top 100 nationally. Additionally, since the last time we saw you guys, we had our homecoming, and we would say it's a success in our eyes. A lot of people turned out to the parade. A lot of people came to the dance. The game was successful as well. And we also had a Spirit Week to anticipate for homecoming, and that was pretty successful. 2 people actually got awards just for expressing the most school spirit, so that was pretty fun as well. I'll let you take it from here.
The schools also had a successful mattress fundraiser running from the band and fostering community involvement, which underscores West High's dedication to fostering a well-rounded educational spirit for the students. And to end it off, I wanted to give a little light on an organization that started from City High, and it's called the MIC, which is the Music Impact Committee. And it's basically a student-led nonprofit organization where young musicians are able to perform at these specific places. And people of the MIC, they find and host places at local venues and organizations for musicians around the city to be able to play and showcase their talent. And they've only recently come to attention, from schools away from City High, like West High. They were talking to me about it, and I think it's a really good idea for people to be able to have the opportunity to play like instruments in front of not only like just people for them to be happy, but just to like practice for like music school if they want. And I'm hoping, like personally, I'm hoping that it's something that's not just within City and West. Like I hope Liberty becomes a part of it and maybe even out of the district.
Great, thank you.
That's really it.
Next up, we have Liberty High, John and Mia.
All right. Hi, guys. I'm Mia Eastman. Okay, so we're going to be starting off with a recap of our homecoming week in September. So thousands participated and watched in our homecoming parade. The senior girls had a great win in the annual Powder Puff flag football game on Wednesday evening against the junior class. The varsity volleyball team earned a win over Cedar Rapids Kennedy in a 3-0 sweep. The varsity football team also beat Linn-Mar 28-7. And then the marching band performed their 2025 show for the first time this school year during their halftime performance. And then over 825 students attended the homecoming dance at Liberty. Next, we have the first in-person parent-teacher conference on October 6th, and there's also an additional virtual conference on October 8th. On October 7th, the senior class had their first meeting for cap and gown orders through Johnston. And on October 7th, we also had a vaccine clinic. On September 10th, officials of the National Merit Scholarship Corporation announced the names of more than 16,000 semifinalists in the 71st Annual National Merit Scholarship Program. At Liberty, we're proud to announce 4 semifinalists: seniors Callum Wu, Neela Galipsy, Sophia Jin, and Pete Hansen. Tomorrow will be the pre-SAT and the National Merit Scholarship Qualifier, so we hope to see a lot of students there. And then additionally, a huge congratulations to Matt Harding for being selected as one of the 5 finalists in Iowa for the prestigious 2025 Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching.
So next for our extracurriculars, we have National Honor Society starting up. So National Honor Society holds bi-weekly meetings with students in 9th and 10th grade, led by Lightning Leaders, which are students in 11th and 12th grade. So this has a really big impact on our school community as these students are able to teach these younger students about the community, principles of Liberty, and what we really want them to know. So this has actually earned our National Honor Society chapter the overall award of excellence from the National Association of Secondary School Principals. And that's just an amazing award to get. In Difference Makers, a student-run club that's purpose to support children and their families battling cancer at the Stead Family Children's Hospital. This Saturday, they are hosting their first annual Friday night at Liberty. Liberty students are also participating in art and literacy they had at October 15th here at the Center for Innovation. Additionally, our Environmental Action Club cleaned a trail in North Liberty and led that entire innovation.
Next up is athletics. For our girls swim team, they're wrapping up the season tonight, actually, with their senior night at 6. The Liberty football team continues to dominate with a 6-1 record this season. The Bolts took down rivals team Iowa City West with a final score of 44-31. On October 3rd, Liberty hosted its 2nd annual Kid Captain Night. So the Difference Makers Club recognized Cora Tyler, a 3rd grader at Penn Elementary who's currently in remission for leukemia, at Liberty High School's football game against Davenport Central. Before kickoff, the boys cross-country team ran the football from the University of Iowa Stead Fieldman's Children's Hospital to the field. Our volleyball team recently hosted a pink out game in support of Breast Friends and their fight to raise awareness for breast cancer, as well as their senior night last Thursday against City High, which ended in a 3-0 sweep for Liberty. We are currently ranked 7th in the 5A class and are gearing up for postseason. The girls' tennis team recently wrapped up their season. Big shout out to Addie Bollier and Vivian Collar, who both qualified for the 2A state single tournament. Boys' golf team is currently ranked 4th overall in Class 4A, and as the cross-country season comes to an end, juniors Keegan Decker and Lars Hildebrand lead the boys to the top 5K times, while junior Chelsea Vitapo leads the girls' team.
So the band has had a lot of awesome successes recently. So the band recently participated at the IHSMA State Marching Band Competition this Saturday, or last Saturday, I suppose. And they also participated at the Muskie Marching Invitational. So at these competitions, they received D1 ratings in all classes from all judges, which is a new school record. And we received a whopping score of 82 at the Muskie Marching Invitational, which is also a school record, along with an award for the best drum majors in Class 4A. The band will perform tomorrow night at the Quarter Marching Classic hosted by Clear Creek Amana, and again on Friday for the Senior Night at Liberty, which is a celebration of seniors and all they have done for the school.
That's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And next up, we'll have City High, Tobiah and Alma.
Hi everyone, good to be here. Just Tobiah today. Alma is practicing for cross country, which is very convenient because the first point I have on my list is that our girls cross country team won 3 divisions at their latest meet, junior varsity, and varsity for the first time since 2012, and our boys got 3rd. So I have here a list with me. The way we prepare for these meetings is that we, in Student Senate, poll the student body on what they want us to tell you. So this is a list of what they are most proud of, which is good because I do not know half the things that go on at City High. Apparently, it's a lot. I'll try to keep this short. So I mentioned cross country. Our marching band is now rated Division 1. It is also at the largest size it has been in school history. Did you guys know that marching band competitions called Division 1 superior? How elitist is that? But that's what we are. City High City High football has won a football game. This has never happened before, so we're all pretty excited. I'm kidding, of course, but that was a big moment for us. Our cheer team won their Fall Spirit Spectacular competition. Our dance team won their Wild West competition. We're seeing very high levels of student engagement throughout the school, which is amazing. We have 5 new clubs this year, which are the Roots and Shoots Club, which is an environmental action club, Mural Club, art club, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Thrift Club, and Amnesty International, which is a humanitarian club. We also have our fall play coming up, East of the Sun, West of the Moon. That's on October 30th and November 1st and 2nd. The Little Hawk Journalism is going to the IHSPA conference next week, and we have several Little Hawk articles that are nominated as national finalists. On the homecoming front, everything went extremely well there. The homecoming parade was huge. We had 35 entries and approximately 4,000 people in attendance, which is, yeah, it's huge. And our homecoming dance went very well. We sold about 1,000 tickets and had no incidents. Show Choir has their Work in Progress concert coming up. They told me to tell you this, 27th, 7 p.m. if you're interested in attending. Dance Marathon raised money for the Stead Family Children's Hospital with their movie night event, and on the Student Senate front, we are getting ready to roll out club grants, which are basically infusion of funds into our clubs so they can do more. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, and thank you so much, student reps, for being here with us tonight. Next up, we will hear from ICEA President Brady Schutt as he provides us an update.
Hi, thanks to the students. First of all, it's always hard to follow all of you, and it's particularly so tonight. But you do a fantastic job. I think it helps all of us remember why we're here. So thank you. I have 2 items. President Malone, Director, Superintendent Degner, Board Secretary Colvin. First, a shout out and thank you to the teams that worked on making today's Art and Literacy Day with Hillsbank visiting author and illustrator Oge Mora here at the CFI a great success. Laura Ebinger and her team at the foundation. Our partner sponsor, Hillsbank, Director of Curriculum Instruction Assessment, Carmen Guinagale, who's seated over there, Art Content Leads, April Kelly, who happens to be with us tonight, Kristen Onestad, and Lisa Petrie, who is our library content lead. We also had art students from the high schools, you heard a reference to that, who were here working with all of our second graders. So today and then tomorrow, all of the second graders will go through this interactive literacy activity. They create art and they have time with our visiting author. So it is fantastic. If you have an opportunity to stop by tomorrow morning as a board member, I think that would be well worth your time. I think it also is the type of immersive learning experience that we're trying to showcase here and that probably we can only do in a place like the Center for Innovation. So I think it sort of speaks to our partnerships with our community partners, with our foundation, and then the value and impact of having this very place, the Center for Innovation. A second thing, on behalf of ICEA, I am pleased to announce that we have made our endorsements for the November 4th school board election. We are incredibly thankful to all of you for being on the board, and also to the really strong, highly qualified slate of candidates that we have this year. One note to the public is that early voting does start tomorrow at the Johnson County Auditor's Office. It'll be 8 to 5 each day from tomorrow all the way through November 3rd. So our team endorsed current directors Jane Finch and Ruthina Malone and challenger Dan Stevenson. Jennifer Horn-Fraser received an honorable mention. And of particular note, I'm pleased to announce that Board President Malone received the Educator's Choice distinction for her outstanding leadership and advocacy. So please, everyone out there in the yeah, thank you, I appreciate that. Everyone, be informed, please be active, head out and vote. If not, on November 4th, before then as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next on the agenda is community comment, but we do not have any, and so we will move on to approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the agenda for tonight.
Second.
Thank you. Board Secretary, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Before we get to tonight's consent agenda, did any directors who reviewed the bills this cycle have any questions or comments? Hearing none, are there any items that directors would like to pull from tonight's consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion regarding tonight's consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. That takes us to committee reports and committee operations committee. We will turn it over to Director Lingo, who chairs that committee.
Today our committee was, the topic was on data governance, and we discussed all the ways that we use data in the district, some of the ways in which they've had to go back through and streamline processes to make sure that it goes to the right people and that it's at the right place and that the people actually know what we have, and things of that nature. And then just some overview on data protection and how we protect it. And one of the interesting parts is that we found out that our staff members passed the phishing test with over 95% of them not clicking on that email. So that's pretty great. And because I always get those phishing emails from Ruthina clones, but I never click them. So I passed those tests. So with that, any questions from the rest of the directors?
No. Just a comment. I think Director Reynolds said that our passing rate was one of the highest for school districts. Maybe. He's sitting back there laughing. Okay. So that's pretty impressive. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Director Lingo.
You're welcome.
That takes us to policy review, and it's the 200 series policies. I believe this is our third time seeing that, and we'll be voting on it. But I will turn it over to Director Williams, who chairs that Policy and Governance Committee, if she had comments she wanted to make.
No, you are correct, President Malone. This is our third review of the 200 series. We're voting on it later tonight. There were very little changes. This is not going to include the Chase isn't here to give me the full 203.13R or R13. This does not include that. We're gonna still have a meeting on that, but it's the rest of the updates to the 200s.
Great. Any other comments from other directors? Hearing none, that takes us to the first discussion item, which is the proposed 2026 Iowa Association of School Board legislative platform. just a reminder, in November at the annual BoardCon convention meeting, there's a delegate assembly where delegates from school districts around the state meet to vote on the proposed legislative platform. I will be serving as that delegate for this year, and so it's always important that we get these in front of us in case the board wants me to make comments, vote against, or really support any of the legislative proposed policies. So this is the opportunity for us to discuss those, if so. Anybody? No? So vote in favor of all of them. All right. That was easy. That takes us to our first presentation of tonight, which is the Ombuds Annual Report, and we will welcome our Ombuds, Abigail Parker. Welcome.
Well, good evening, and it is a privilege to present the 2024-2025 Ombuds Annual Report and honor Ombuds Day with you all. Ombuds Day was just this past Thursday, and it is recognized by the American Bar Association in order to promote the Ombuds role and encourage greater use of Ombuds programs. The 2025 Ombuds Day theme is Empowering Voices, Resolving Challenges. In honor of Ombuds Day, I will start by providing a few reminders on the Ombuds role, and then we'll highlight the Ombuds process. I will then share key data points and highlight several results from the Ombuds feedback survey. It's important to have an understanding of my role as I'm going through the report. There are many types of ombuds, legislative or executive ombuds, for example, which are more formal roles, and organizational ombuds, which take on a more informal role, such as myself. So organizational ombuds operate as a general concern and conflict resolution resource. Sorry about that. And are often referred as trusted navigators. Here are some words and phrases that embody the Ombuds role to keep in mind throughout the presentation. Organizational ombuds are expected to practice in accordance with International Ombuds Association, or IOA, guiding principles of independence, impartiality, informality, and confidentiality. We should operate independently of other district departments in order to serve as a neutral or impartial resource. We do not participate in formal processes such as investigation, disciplinary, or evaluative processes, and communications are confidential to the maximum extent permitted by law. Exceptions to confidentiality include, but are not limited to, mandatory reporting, Title IX, BOE ethical violations, and imminent harm concerns. So last year, in honor of Ombuds Day, I focused on and emphasized the value an ombuds brings to an organization. This year, I will highlight the ombuds process. So the first step of engaging in this model with a visitor is the most critical and thus takes the most time. I start by explaining my role with the individual to set clear expectations of how I may or may not be able to assist. I then spend the majority of the time listening to understand the full concern. One of the tenets of Ombuds work is to first focus on listening and learning as much as possible about the issue before considering options. We certainly want to avoid surface level approaches and strive to identify the heart of the issue or the concern. An essential part of the Ombuds process is asking questions to ensure accurate understanding and identify core issues and goals. Once there's a thorough understanding established of the issues, the remainder of the time is spent discussing options and resources. One of the most frequent questions I often get is what happens when someone contacts the Ombuds office. So I'm hoping this provides some clarity and encourages individuals to reach out for assistance. As I present key data results, please keep in mind the term concern is used as an umbrella term for what may be questions, concerns, issues, feedback, inquiries, or requests for support. And then as a reminder, here are the concern categories that are used, and additional detail on each is provided in Appendix A and B of my annual report. So starting with the general concern and contact data, this shows the number of contacts and concerns received over the last 3 years. Every time an individual reaches out to the Ombuds office, whether it's via phone, email, or in person, it is considered and logged as a contact. However, one contact may bring forth multiple concerns, so that's the difference there between contacts and concerns. As an FYI, for this year, I am already estimating an increase from last year's numbers. So last year, I ended the first trimester with a total of 33 contacts, and just halfway through this trimester, I am currently at 32 contacts. In regards to who reached out to the Ombuds office, this data is fairly similar to past years in that it is predominantly employees, followed by parent guardians reaching out to the Ombuds office. And first, I'll focus on parent, guardian, community member, and student concerns, and then we'll take a look at employee concerns separately as well. For parent, guardian, and community member concerns, there were a total of 45 concerns received. 44 of those concerns came from parent guardians, and 1 came from a community member. The most frequent concern categories, as you can see, were constituent relationships, service administrative issues, legal, regulatory, financial, and compliance. Historically, these have been the top 3 concern categories in varying order. And for students, there were a total of 5 concerns received, with concern categories of constituent relationships and legal, regulatory, financial, and compliance. For both groups, concerns were predominantly based at the secondary level, which you can see. So in addition to sharing data, I wanted to also provide examples of concerns I may receive. So for a parent-guardian example, I'm going to skip a few here in the interest of time. Here's an example. A parent was concerned with children witnessing hateful and/or inappropriate language by other students. They wanted to submit feedback to the teacher and/or principal regarding how the situation was handled or how it could be handled in improved ways going forward. However, they did not want their child to be impacted or treated differently in any way, providing this feedback or in the process of providing this feedback. After talking with the Ombuds and talking through their options and district resources, they were able to select a path forward that they felt most comfortable with. So when discussing options with individuals, I make sure to address their comfort level and preferences as we talk through each of the options. It's my hope that sharing information and providing a safe space to talk through their concern will help them confidently choose the path that's best for their family. And a student concern example, so student expressed concern and frustration regarding teachers' grading policy. Student questioned whether these practices were in line with district policy and didn't know who to go to with their concern. Through providing a safe space to talk through their concern, they were able to understand their options and decide the best path forward. I was able to connect a student and parent with principal and assisted with coordinating a meeting to communicate their concern. So in situations like this, I may share information on district policies or processes, clarification on roles and responsibilities of staff. I may share, for example, the board policy on public complaints or information on the Say Something Anonymous reporting tool. In any case where a student may need additional resources or support, I may connect them with their guidance counselor at their school or connect the family with Care Solace as well. So jumping to employee data, for employee concerns, there were a total of 77 received, with the most frequent concern categories of evaluative relationships, career progression and development, and peer and colleague relationships. Historically, evaluative relationships has been the top concern category, and employee concerns were predominantly based at the secondary level, with elementary not too far behind there. So providing an employee concern example, employee expressed frustration regarding recent misunderstanding with their direct evaluator. Employee felt they were wrongfully accused and mischaracterized. After talking through their experience with the Ombuds, they felt comfortable reaching out to their evaluator to have a critical conversation. The employee was able to have a productive, successful conversation with their supervisor, able to express how the incident made them feel and how it impacted them. The supervisor expressed understanding, and they were able to discuss ways to show mutual respect going forward. So at times, an individual may feel apprehensive or discouraged to bring forth their concern. In my role, I may help empower the individual to voice their concern by helping them prepare for a critical conversation, whether it's talking through what information is helpful to share, ways to communicate core concerns, talking through ideas for resolution and how to bring those forward, and potentially just sharing conflict resolution best practices as well. In any case where an employee is particularly distraught, I may also connect and make sure to share the Covenant Workplace Solutions Employee Assistance Program as well. So let's get through some of those. This graph compares concern categories from the last 3 years to show and provide a bigger picture. Looking at the data from the last 3 years combined, the top concern categories were constituent relationships, evaluative relationships, and legal, regulatory, financial, and compliance, which you can kind of glean from taking a look at those numbers. And lastly, I'll review some results from the Ombuds feedback survey. I always like to highlight the responses to these 2 questions as they point to the impact of the Ombuds role. You can see the responses to the questions, what would have happened if the Ombuds was not an available resource, and what was the result of contacting the Ombuds office. I especially appreciate and wanted to share this feedback I received from the feedback survey because it emphasizes the heart of Ombuds work and why I do enjoy and love the Ombuds work that I do. Having the Ombuds office as a resource for constituents can feel like such a kindness when someone is in need of support and can often help individuals feel heard and validated with ways to move forward from a situation. While this presentation was meant to mainly communicate data, it's important to remember that each data point represents an individual who potentially started off as feeling at a loss and not sure where to turn for help, and hopefully left with information, resources, direction, and action items to help address the situation or concern, whatever it may be. So there's my contact information and any questions for me on the annual report.
Thank you so much. Directors, do you have questions or comments?
Janet, as always, these are remarkably encouraging and impressive reports. I'm so very happy that we have an Ombuds office and that you are the Ombuds person. You're very skilled at this. I hope that as we go forward, we make your services more widely known and available, both to staff, the community members especially, and to students. Thanks.
Thank you.
What kind of, sorry, just try. What kind of situations fall under the legal, regulatory, financial, and compliance?
Yep.
I saw it dip down, but what was the second highest?
So that can be various things. If you take a look at the appendix, that can help provide a definition there. But predominantly for this report, and I'm going to take a look here.
Sorry, feel free. If you need a moment, it's all good.
Thanks. Yep. I wrote down some extra notes here in case you asked. So for example, with the parent, guardian, and community member concerns, for the subcategory detail of legal, regulatory, financial, and compliance, there were 8 concerns received, and 6 of those were bullying and harassment related. So typically, when you see that category, that's predominantly the subcategory that is predominant from what I'm seeing. But certainly in the appendix, you can see what types of the subcategory will help pinpoint what the tally of what concerns were actually received, if that's helpful.
I didn't think about looking there, but thank you.
Sure.
I see it.
Okay, sounds good.
When students contact you, are you able to talk to them one-on-one if they're under 18?
Yes, that was something that I was sure to check with the district policy and guidance from ombuds mentors and other K through 12 ombuds through cohort group I meet with monthly. And that is something I made sure that I was able to do. Typically, if students are reaching out to me, I may have a conversation one-on-one, and then we talk about, you know, does your parent or guardian have the same information? Would it be helpful to loop them in and have me discuss with them as well? So we talk through that, and oftentimes I am connecting with the parent as well, or guardian as well. Yeah.
And the number, I know you say it's secondary, but is it primarily high school, or do you get middle schoolers as well?
I believe up until this point, all of the contacts I received were high school.
Okay,
for secondary.
thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? And thank you for the report. I always appreciate receiving it.
Absolutely.
Any other comments from directors?
One final one. How do we get your information out more because I saw that it's primarily being utilized by faculty members and staff members of the district. How do we as a board, I guess, or at least myself as a board member, get that information out to parents and students? Or do they have any strategies from your cohort that we could implement better or anything like that?
Yes, we definitely talk through that quite often, marketing strategies and how we can let people know about ombuds programs and services. So there are things that I try to each and every year. So every year I visit the schools and drop off information at the main office, ask if they have the front office has any questions on my role, make sure they have brochures. Over the years, made sure that there was an ombuds webpage right away. I created an introductory video. I think I also reached out to secondary schools, student newsletters to see if they wanted to do a piece or talk about ombuds services. So certainly lots of different things that I can try, and certainly if there are other ideas, feel free to let me know. I'm certainly at this point leaning towards word of mouth. That seems to be the most effective way that people are able to refer to the Ombuds office, but certainly trying to think of creative ways every year to get the word out. It seems to be a sort of resource that you don't need it until you need it, sort of thing. And then hopefully you have a friend or a coworker or someone that says, hey, we have an Ombuds office, and can refer and share that information. But certainly we'll keep working on more creative ways and new ways to try to reach out and share information.
That's a good question, Director Lingo. Just curious, do you know if your information is listed in handbooks for the schools?
I'm not quite sure. I know that we had requested a standing item in principal newsletters that go out, on the Say Something posters, contact information, the QR code that's on the back of student IDs, that sort of thing. But I am not quite sure about the student handbooks or the handbooks. I can certainly check on that.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much for joining. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Eastham might have.
Well, in listening to your conversation, I just thought, I wonder, Superintendent Degner, if two things. One, I assume it's fine for principals and teachers to suggest references to the Ombuds office for community members, parents, students that come to them for situations or are involved in situations for them.
Yes, and Janet was very kind here in explaining some of the things she's done to try to do additional outreach, but she spent time with each of our principals individually, made that personal relationship so that they do feel comfortable making that connection. I think each and every year she's worked really hard to try to continue the spread the news of the Ombuds office and that people can access it. And so I think any ideas and solutions she's definitely willing to pursue and follow through on, and she's got a good track record of doing that. That's kind of a question we've routinely had from you guys and from others, just about how do we keep sharing the resource. And so any and all ideas I think are welcome, and she's done a great job at taking advantage of those opportunities.
I think, Janet, you may have made a presentation to the DPO group at some point in the past?
Yep, I attended a DPO meeting and briefly mentioned the Ombuds role. I have not been able to do a full presentation as of yet, but can certainly consider that and reach out to do a full presentation, but have attended and shared, introduced myself and shared on the role. So that's a great idea.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Next up, we have our presentation on the Iowa School Performance Profiles. And I don't know if Superintendent Degner wanted to say a few words.
I think Lucas is going to say a lot of words, so
Oh,
I'll keep
yeah.
mine short. But no, we're just excited to bring back these results to you guys. We introduced just a little bit of information to you with the annual progress report at our last meeting and wanted to do a little bit more of a additional follow-up here and provide some more detail to you about where our schools fell out in these rankings, and then the data that informed those rankings.
Well, thank you, Superintendent Degner. I'm sure that's a challenge to use fewer words than I was planning to use today, but I get the honor of speaking and presenting the information to you tonight. There's questions, certainly some of our colleagues on the tables over there might be able to help answer some questions as well. So again, we gave you a little preview during our teaching and learning report a couple meetings ago. So I appreciate the honor to be in front of you tonight to go through the information. This is about a month and a half to 2 months earlier than we normally give this presentation. So kind of goes through some of the information about there's some pros and cons with the early release of this, and we'll get to that here in just a little bit. We'll start with some backgrounds of the ESSA and the school performance profile because it did change last year. So just a brief overview of that. We'll get into the ranking of the ratings as well. And then we'll get into our district results. And then we wanted to highlight one particular section that brought a lot of questions last year and a lot of discussion, which was the post-secondary readiness with our high schools. So just a reminder, we've talked about the performance profile for a number of years. Last year was a new year for in terms of the scoring and the ratings of the categories for all of our buildings. So the main parts of the profile continued, but how the scoring was broken down did change drastically last year. And we'll go into that here in just a little bit with the slides. The good piece of information, last year's information that we presented in terms of how buildings are scored stayed the exact same this year. So that's good. And here you see the example of how the elementary and middle schools, which use the same scale, the 700-point scale, you see it there, and the majority of those categories have equal percentages as far as making up the score. You see the high school is a little bit different. That's due to the graduation, both the 4- and 5-year rate, as well as the post-secondary scoring. So again, the scoring has stayed the exact same. One of the things that we noted last year compared to previous years, one of the largest changes that happened with the scoring here was there was different percentages for growth of mathematics and language arts compared to proficiency. So we talked in great detail about that last year in larger districts or more diverse districts. One of the things that we are prideful of is the growth that we can make for students that exist within our system from one year to the next. And we really excelled in those areas. But with that being equal representation to proficiency, we see a little bit of a change in how our buildings are ranked. The categories have remained the same as well, using those, using that 700 or 900 point scale. We still use 6 rating categories throughout the profile and throughout the rankings this year as well. So last year we talked a lot about attendance and the changes that the state required with attendance. We talked a lot about chronic absenteeism and what that means and how the state is then going to determine students that make growth with chronic absenteeism. So this was, it can be somewhat confusing as far as what that calculations look like. Mathematics people probably have a great idea as far as what these numbers mean. I'm going to break it down in more layman's terms, hopefully, and that's okay. Remember, chronic absenteeism is students that miss 10% or more of the days of the school year. So really, they take a look at 2 previous school years. If a student was chronically absent, they consider growth in chronic absenteeism as the student in the following year, where they still consider chronically absent, or were they not? So when you see the numbers here in just a little bit, that's what factors into, do students stay chronically absent, or do they move off that chronically absent list? And one of the highlights that we really had to show for the information this year is the growth and the improvements that we've made in chronic absenteeism. We've highlighted this a number of different times, the work that our buildings are doing, whether participating in the engagement meetings, the student support meetings within their buildings, what they're doing with the students and their families and their staff to get the students in the building, which we know if we want to instruct our students and see growth in our students, they first need to be there in the school building. So you'll see the numbers as far as how they support the growth in that work here shortly. One of the things we also highlighted last year, again, these are not changes, these are continued to see the areas as far as how we look at the categories. any building that's targeted, we'll get into that in just a little bit. If a building is targeted, they no matter what their score was to start off, they would drop a category, whether they had one or more targeted subgroups. They were dropped down a category because of that. And also participation rates. We had one of our attendance centers last year that did not meet the 95% participation rate in one of the tests in one of their subgroups. So anytime that happens, those buildings also get dropped down a category. So you could risk or jeopardize if you have a target subgroup, in addition to not meeting the 95% threshold, you have the buildings would be dropped two different categories. So I'm proud to announce tonight that all of our buildings met that 95% threshold, and not only met it, but exceeded it. So, we put a lot of stress onto that. Our testing window occurs over a matter of a couple weeks, but it's a lot of organizational pieces between the administrators and teachers, making sure that when students are not there, what are they doing to make sure that the students get those tests done within the testing window. All right, let's take a look at the results. So this was a data table that we shared during the teaching and learning report. So you see that zero line across the top there. What we'd love to see is all those different categories or those domains that you see across the bottom there. We would love to see those all above the zero line. That means we've made growth. But you see some areas that we still have areas of work to do with our teams. I do want to highlight that chronic absenteeism. Again, I said you want to be above the line. This is the one and only one that you want to see well below the line. So, the scale looks a little bit different on a couple different pieces of these, but that's a pretty good increase. So that's negative 9.58, so almost 10%. We saw a 10% increase in our students that were no longer chronically absent. So we dropped down 10%, which again is a good thing. So that was one of our that was our second highest area of growth within these domains that are listed there. Our second highest was our highest was our post-secondary readiness piece, which we'll get into here shortly with our work-based learning as well as our concurrent enrollment courses. So one of the things I do want to highlight, because there are some number of different areas that we can take pride in with this, whether it be attendance or chronic absenteeism. This was a great surprise. And, we take a look at science, and we saw a drastic increase with our students that were proficient in science as well as math. We've seen some of our numbers in the past dip a little bit with our percentage proficient in math, and we saw that a positive increase in that this year. And then, as I mentioned, the post-secondary readiness piece is a huge badge of honor that we're wearing this year with our secondary buildings throughout our entire profile. As we take a look at some of those domains that we are below the mark there with the zero, I do want to highlight a couple of those pieces. That first one you see after chronic absenteeism is our English language learners with their ELPA test, so their proficiency level. So we did see a decrease in that, but we are above the state average. I think the state average is 50, and I think we're at 53. So again, while we dipped from one year to the next, we still continue to be above the state average with how we rank towards that. The other piece that I wanted to highlight with these was within our growth in mathematics. Again, while we did not make improvements from last year's profile to this, we are above the state. I think we're right at the state average, which is 50 with that growth piece. Next, we wanted to break down, show a comparison from last year's profile rankings with the categories to this year. So you'll see on the far right where the average, where the percentages of the buildings throughout the state of Iowa tend to find themselves in, which is that commendable and acceptable area. I'm sorry, we're missing part of the bottom here. I apologize for that with the bar down there. But you'll see the comparison from last year to this year. So one of the couple pieces to highlight here, we saw double the amount of buildings in the commendable range, acceptable as well. We increased the number of buildings by 1, and we saw a large decrease in the number of buildings in the needs improvement, down 6. Unfortunately, we had one less high-performing building than what we had in previous years. One of the things, we went through these presentations today with both our elementary and secondary, highlighting these items, and one of the things I'm very proud of with our administrators that I've seen evolve over the last few years is their attention to the data about what this means and what they can then do to improve on it. So those are things we didn't necessarily always see within the system, but over the course of the last few years, they're really focused on where is it that we need to work on, and then what can we do to get that work done with not only our admin teams, but within our staff as well. So you'll see kind of how that's broken down as far as the change from one year to the next with our performance profiles. And when we take a look at the buildings, and that's what we encourage them to do today, is take a look at what those scores are. And they are just, in some cases, the buildings is just a matter of points. And and one of the things that I want to highlight is when they're targeted, they're dropped down a category. So you see some of those numbers there. it would actually be increased if they made slight improvements with their subgroups. So I think that's always important to highlight. But again, I'd love to see the fact that they're extremely vigilant with how they're looking and examining this data moving forward. Again, this shows the same data that was on the previous slide. We just wanted to break it down by our different levels here. And then we wanted to highlight the growth of many of our buildings. So, we're going to go through in just a little bit the targeted buildings and the subgroups that they are targeted within their profile. But one thing we're extremely proud of, we had 9 buildings that were targeted in 1 or more subgroups last year that were no longer targeted. I would say, we're not crazy about all the changes that were made to the profile and the scoring, but one of the things that I think was the improvement with one of the pieces of improvement with the profile. If a building was targeted in the past, they were targeted for 2 years. There was no way to get off that targeted list for 2 years. And that was due to how late these profiles were released. So one of the main drivers to having this information released as early as it is that it gives the ability for the buildings to work on this early before the statewide assessments and their ability to get off the list after 1 year. So again, this list shows the hard intention of the work, and we'll get the last piece of this information is what we're going to do moving forward with our buildings. But this again speaks to the process that was put in place for them to make those improvements, but really speaks to and highlights the work of the administrators and the teachers within the building to work with their students. So this just takes a look at every single one of our buildings, elementary, middle school, and high school. So again, that 0 would mean no change, and then we'd love to see those buildings above the line and not below the line. So as we look through these, obviously our buildings have taken a look at this in a number of different ways. We encourage them to not only take a look at the overall score, but what does that overall score mean for your building? Is it a particular subgroup? Is it a particular grade level within your building, looking at proficiency and growth levels? So that is the work that's ahead of this. We have some buildings that are extremely proud of the work that they've done, and they saw those increases based upon the work that they've put in over the course of the last year. And we have some buildings that are really looking and digging into the data. That was the topic of our conversation today. Buildings aren't necessarily happy with where they're at, but what do they need to do with their staff, and looking at the remaining part of the school year with their school improvement plans, our collaboration coordination with Grant Wood, what can be put in place as far as easy supports along the way to help support students across every grade level of their building.
Lucas, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, please do.
But I want to come back to this slide
Yeah.
at the end of your presentation, just to let you know.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll try to remember that, Charlie, but I might need it.
Yeah, I know you're overwhelmed.
All right, so again, this is not great here. Hopefully it's better looking on your screen here. So this takes a look at the different groups that are targeted. So this lists every single one of our buildings in our system, elementary and secondary, in the category that they fell in on. But what you see here also is if they were targeted in any subgroup, that's with the superscript that's in orange. So you see the key up there on the right-hand side, any targeted subgroup, and those are our Black, African American, REL students, FRL, and IEP. So you see those superscripts would indicate if they are targeted in 1 or more of those subgroups. If they have none of those markings, that means they're not targeted in any subgroup. What you'll see after those parentheses.
I think you can just minimize the screen so they
Oh, that would help. Thank you. Oh, my heavens. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. Good teamwork. All right, that looks much better. But what you'll see here after the parentheses is the number of buildings that have that targeted subgroup. So again, you'll see here, we have a number of buildings that are targeted in any of those subgroups. And what I encourage the buildings to do today as they take a look and examine their data even more with their teams is the state provides a cut gap score, and if you're below 0, that makes you targeted in one of those subgroups. If you're above 0, obviously you are not. So in some of ours, some principals today were like, Lucas, did you realize we were like 0.2 or 0.3 away from that gap cut score that would have taken us away from that targeted subgroup? I'm like, yeah, I realize that's it's a point of pride, but now that shows the work that you have to do, and in some cases, that's just a matter of a couple students making improvements in some of those areas. So again, that breaks down the targeted subgroups and the work between what's required of targeted buildings compared to non-targeted buildings is a little bit different, and we'll get into those state required actions here shortly. I had mentioned earlier today, or earlier in this presentation, excuse me, one of the highlights is the fact that these buildings can exit after one particular year, and that just this slide again continues to show what would make a student building a targeted building, and what needs to happen for buildings to exit targeted status, as we saw from 9 of our buildings last year. All right, so these are the things. So one of the things that happens when they move the timeline up is these deadlines also get moved up as well. So these traditionally have sometimes been in April or June or February. They are now due by December. So we've got a crash course of meetings that are going to take place over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks to make sure that we're, in compliant with these deadlines here with the state. Look at it, 2 sides of the coin here. It's going to take priority some of the other things that we had scheduled with our administrators, but the sooner they get this work done, the sooner they can put the initiatives into play in the buildings with their students. So we'll go through. One of the items is our resource allocation review, which we do both with district and building leaders. The Iowa School Performance Profile Data Review. These are required actions from targeted buildings only. There are some points of action here that are good for targeted buildings, but they're also good for all of our buildings. So with the exception of the resource allocation review and progress monitoring, all of our buildings across our K-12 system will be taking part in the data review, the SAMIR, the self-assessment multi-tiered systems of support implementation. Say that a few times fast, and then our action planning. So again, all of our buildings will be taking place no matter whether they're targeted or not in the majority of these required actions. One thing, we'll continue to work with Grant Wood. Obviously, the role of Grant Wood in our district has changed a little bit, but they'll continue to play a vital role in helping lead and facilitate these meetings, in addition to helping support buildings that are of targeted status. These next, I would encourage you to take a look at these in thorough detail. If you take a look at the slides before tonight, I realized that I had some lines inaccurate. So please pay attention to these ones and not the ones that you saw before. The good thing about previewing these today is we saw that, but I apologize if you had already looked at them prior to tonight, these next few. So what you'll see here is these next slides are a breakdown of all of the schools within the state and how our buildings compare. So you'll see that red average all the way, that horizontal line across on the next few slides, and that'll stay the same with that number. My assumption, my belief is that's the average building size across the entire state. So it doesn't necessarily say that anywhere, and I've tried to remove it. I can't remove it. I believe that's the average building size of all of our schools across the state of Iowa. What I would love for you to pay attention to is the vertical line that shows where the state average of the index score. So what we'd love to see is our buildings on that line or to the right of that line that shows that they are at or above the state average. So as you'll see from these next few slides, this just shows the work that we will be undertaking with our buildings and their leaders. So again, sorry, I probably should have said in detail. The y-axis there shows how large the buildings are, and then the index score that determines the category or the rankings for all our schools is along the x-axis there at the bottom. You'll see the same information. This takes into account both middle school and junior highs across the state of Iowa. Again, we use the same score, it's the same average for the middle schools, and you'll see 2 out of the 3 of our middle schools, while we have the largest in the state of Iowa, we have 3 of them are in the top percentage of students as far as enrollment of our student body. You'll see 2 out of the 3 are above, to the right, or well to the right of the average state index score. And then lastly, I combined 2 different slides here because one of the things we've done in some of our meetings here is where does Iowa City schools compare into other schools within the UEN? So I did not have the capability to do this with our middle school and elementaries, but what I wanted to do was show our 3 high schools, our 3 comprehensive high schools in relation to individual buildings as that make up the urban education network. So, when we consider the high-achieving students and student bodies in the buildings that we have in our district, I think this is another highlight. We've spent a lot of time talking about the AP scores and the U.S. News and World Report rankings. That's something to be extremely proud of. But when you take a look at 3 comprehensive high schools with the number of students, with the diversity that we have within our buildings, this speaks to amazing work that our buildings are doing, especially when you take a look at some of the other buildings and some of the makeups of what those buildings are and the areas that they are within. This is just a really pride point for us when we take a look at our 3 comprehensive high schools. All right. We spent a lot of time on post-secondary readiness last year, and this is looking specifically, this only factors into our high schools. So we talked last year, post-secondary readiness is made up of 3 different items. College credit, that's students that are scoring a 3 or higher on the AP test or taking courses through the University of Iowa or Kirkwood. That's one item. The other is work-based learning, is what type of experiences are we doing to bringing in people that are in that work field and having meaningful experiences with them within the classroom. Those are two things that factor into post-secondary readiness. This year was supposed to be the year that industry-recognized credentials was also supposed to be used. It's not. We were told it's supposed to be next year. So, we got the results back. I'm like, where's the IRCs? They're nowhere. Do we know why? No. Okay. So we were told they'll be used next year as part of the scoring. So we're ready for whenever they want to come out. But one of the things that's tied to those is a type of assessment that students will take upon completion of some of these experiences. These next few slides just show from our high schools, our three comprehensive high schools, our alternative as well as our online program, as far as where they are within the college credit. Again, that's 3 or more on the AP or enrollment in Kirkwood or University of Iowa courses, and the work-based learning experiences in the classroom. So you'll see that the graph shows where they're at this year, and what I wanted to show in that table is what was the positive change or the negative change from last year to this year. And this was, like you saw from that data piece that we're going to go, that you saw from the very beginning with the domains, this was our largest area of growth when we take a look at those profiles. Again, all areas extremely prideful with our high schools here. Again, and then we take a look at data comparison, the kind of the catalyst for the work that we needed to do. I remember standing in front of you last year, and we were second from the bottom in comparison to the other UEN districts. Second from the bottom in a very successful district, and that was not appropriate. So that really drove the work that we did. Like, all right, where are we at as a district? What does it mean that we need to do and take initiatives at, both from a district level and a building level? And we went from second to the bottom to third highest in the state, just in the course of 1 year. And we'll get here in just a little bit of the reasons why. So ignore those dotted lines. For some reason, they were just shifted to the above the line, but that state average is right there along the left-hand side, so you could be able to track where our buildings, where the other districts fall in comparison to the state average. And then when we factor in, well, what did we do to see the drastic increase that we saw within post-secondary readiness? And this chart here indicates that. I want to make sure, like we talked about this with our high school folks today. Dominic Audia, who works with our CTE, he retired and came back, thankfully, and hopefully has no plans to re-retire again for a while. So he has so much knowledge within this, both his coordination with our district staff and coordination with the state. What are some easy gains within this, and what are some potential future gains that we would see with post-secondary readiness? So really you see kind of the work that was done both at a district curricular level as well as work with our teachers on our content leads. Like, what was it that led to the increase that we saw? And one of the things that I do want to highlight is just what we saw with the increase in classes. When we took a look at 23-24 in our program of studies, how many courses we have within our high school were considered work-based learning? It was 8. When we took a look at our program of studies this year, it is at 37. So, we made drastic impacts to, like, again, some of these things were already occurring. It's just we didn't document them appropriately. Some of these things, it was either kind of minor tweaks or major tweaks, looking at how we can make this a work-based learning experience with our classes, whether it be looking at the curriculum itself or looking to bring in people from our community who work in those particular fields to meet the requirements of the state with work-based learning. So again, I wanted to highlight those two pieces, like going from 8 to 37 in the matter of 2 years. And then we also have 20 courses at Kirkwood that are also considered work-based learning that we've been partnering with them to making sure that they are tabulated accordingly as well. So again, speaks to that, the whole presentation tonight speaks to some really good things that have been done over the course of the last year since last year's rankings, but then also speaks to the great work that we have ahead. So, we'll continue to work with our buildings. We're proud of the work that our administrators are going to take on, and they'll learn from each other, work with their teams to continue to make the growth they need to with students. So with that, Charlie, I'm going to go back to that slide you so desperately wanted to see and take any questions or any discussion.
I might just offer before you guys, or as you think about your questions here, what we had planned for this fall is to kind of take you through a journey of core instruction and then interventions, and then kind of that would all culminate in what these results were, so you kind of knew some of the pieces we were working on this year. So as you maybe ponder your questions, just please know we will come back to a presentation on the 28th and then again on the 11th of November that talks about core instruction and interventions. and how we're trying to address, some of the results we're seeing or trying to build off of potential success that are there too. We'll have an opportunity to spend some more time with you on those subjects as well.
Thanks, Lucas, for bringing this up. So looking at the right-hand end of this this graph, we see the ISPP yearly change for all of the middle schools and the high schools. Almost all of the high schools and middle schools, they all have positive yearly change. But then if you look at the elementary schools, they're a lot of them are decreased yearly, show a decreased yearly change. A number of them show some increased yearly change. So I don't quite understand how all the kids that are in those elementary schools get to the middle schools and high schools, and suddenly their performance is great. So am I misunderstanding something from this data?
I was going to make a joke, but I'm not going to make a joke. Eliza's got her. I will not make any comment about leadership of the different levels. So yeah, go ahead, Eliza.
Thank you. You know what, Director Eastman, if I had to answer to that, I would probably sleep a lot better at night, because this is the stuff that kind of keeps me awake as we continue to think about what we need to do differently. I think one thing that we are digging into the data around is this performance profile no longer in elementary encompasses our sixth graders, because they are now in the middle school. And so our N score is lower in terms of the number of students that were in our system. And so we're digging into where we see that difference with just our overall population. The other thing that we're continuing to look at is when we see our students entering our system in elementary, a lot of our students are learning English. And that's where we see our increase in ELL population, and we see that directly correlated with our reading and our ELA assessments. Typically, we see those assessments obviously are not read to them, but some of our other assessments like math and science, those are read to them. And so sometimes we can see students' actual ability to perform those tasks when they have that accommodation. But that is, not to say that we are not digging into a lot of this. And what you will see in our next board presentation, talking about what we're doing to address the core, is looking at our universal tier tools, because we know, and a practice that we have kind of fallen into a trap at elementary is really focusing our time and attention, because of some legislative pieces, into our intervention system. And so we have been systematically trying to support our kids one child at a time, which is fantastic. And we need to look at what we're doing in the most largest amount of time, which is in core instruction. And so we are digging into that. I will say another thing, just very preliminary reflection and conversation and anecdotal data from our team teaching pilot, those 3 buildings that we presented to you last year. I'm hearing some fantastic things about kind of the formative assessments that those teachers are giving to their students and the growth that they're seeing there. We don't have those measurable outcomes, and we won't till our next benchmarking period. But we are trying a lot of different things and trying to monitor those and hoping that we'll see that growth in there as we continue to work. The other hard piece that my elementary friends, I think I owe to share this is only half of our student population at elementary. There is nothing in the Iowa School Performance Profile that measures the growth of kindergarten, first and second grade, because they don't take Iowa assessments. And so this is just third, fourth, and fifth grade. I think that if we ask them that question, the same thing that keeps me up at night is what's keeping them up at night as well, of thinking about how we can improve our core instruction and make sure that as we embark in level 3 of HRS, we'll talk a little bit about that next week too, as we feel optimistic about the pieces that we have kind of coming down the pike and that we're putting in place right now to attack these.
And just to highlight that too, obviously we're looking at, for the majority of these scores, these indicators, these domains, we're looking at how students perform over the course of 3-4 days with statewide assessments. We're not looking necessarily at the achievement of students the other 170 plus days. And one of the things that the state has done is changed, it's now an adaptable test that students will be taking beginning this spring, but they also, heaven forbid, finally released information as far as the types of skills that students are going to be tested over. So we are able to see the different domains, the different standards, the different pieces of each test, and as far as the percentages of those questions that are made up of the test. So we now have a playbook as far as what are those things that we should be mindful of when we're preparing students to take these tests, but also mindful of what should exist within the classroom those other days. So we're going to be taking a deep dive in not only district, but with our buildings as far as what does the new test look like and how does that relate or correlate to what we're spending our time on currently in the classroom.
Charlie? Well, thank you for a very in-depth set of ideas about why this graph looks like it does. But it also occurs to me that maybe the difference between elementary and middle school and high school is assessment, not necessarily student or teaching. Anyway, that's something that to me would be suggested by this information.
Yeah. And I think the other piece is that we're doing, because finally with the Iowa assessments, we do have the ability, ISAS, we do have the ability to look at those domains and align with our priority standards, because this is just rooted in like concept, not facts yet, because I don't have the data to prove what I'm going to say next. But, it's thinking of our priority standards and our scope and sequence and the things that we have determined that are going to have the most leverage in each grade level. Are they aligned to the assessment? I think there is just still some debate of whether or not the assessment is truly aligned, the assessment's aligned to the standards in the first place. So until we can have some clarity there, but as much as, we'd love to say that then our kids are miraculously performing well in the middle school, we have to think that some of the substandards that we're hitting on actually more important. And so that's the work that we now are beginning next week to think through just an alignment process and a crosswalk between our standards, the priorities, the amount of time and materials that we are utilizing to address that in core instruction to make sure that we're intervening on the right things. And so that's the work that we're starting to dig into to make sure that we are teaching the most essential components that are also being asked of our students to be able to perform on proficiently.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry.
You're welcome.
No, Director, one thing I want to point out, because Director Proctor pointed out as well, the test scores, proficiency is measured by 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, okay, in our elementary schools. Growth is only measured in 4th and 5th grade because they take that 3rd grade score and then they're looking at growth at them in 4th grade and taking that 4th grade score and looking at them in 5th grade. So some of our buildings do only have like 40 students that are getting measured growth on. But at the same point in time, one thing that I want to point out is that the way we have designed RAM in our buildings may put some of our buildings at a distinct disadvantage on these. Because we have classrooms going up to 32, like I'm looking at some of those last year where I know we had classrooms of 32 for these students, and we got emails. I know I'm looking at Penn as one of those that dropped, and we got plenty of emails last year from Penn. And the way that we have designed RAM, I'm not discounting the equity portion of RAM, but if we are getting graded on these grade levels, but then we are putting class sizes of 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, it's much better this year than last year because we added some FTE, right? But that's one of the things that I keep in consideration when I look at this and I start to think, well, what am I doing as the policy standpoint here of when I see a classroom of 30 and what that means for the overall rating of a building, right? So and again, if we throw in the younger grades where we have some of these buildings where they're classrooms of 15 or 17, it's going to be probably different, but I don't know. It's one of those deals that I'm looking at. I'm just, there's other things going on. When I look at last year, we switched math curriculum, right? So there's going to be a learning curve there. But overall, when we look at math, it's gone down not math, but yeah, math has gone down this year, 2 points from a 52 to a 50. So that's like going from and I need to point out that with growth. But with growth is one of those ones that it's a standardized scale. So 1 point drop is 1/10 of a standard deviation. And depending on where you are on that bell curve, because it's bell curve, a 1 point drop can be much larger than others. So like dropping from a 52 to a 58 is like dropping from the 58th percentile in growth to the 50th percentile in growth. So, I mean, that's where, when I start looking at the data, and I pulled it, I'm happy to share it with anybody that wants it. Some of I just want to know what exactly is going on with growth in elementary and more elementary ELA across the district, but elementary with math and growth. Do you think it's just from the new curriculum, the learning curve, or where is that at?
Yeah, great question. Again, this is one assessment that is looking at growth, and we use our universal screening data, which we assess our elementary students K-5 3 times a year. And we monitor that growth system-wide, building-wide, and then individually at the student level. And what we are noticing with math is we are seeing our students that typically have underperformed making the largest growth on those measures that are allowing us to be a little bit more timely in our interventions and our support systems. We've also seen buildings. So if you guys remember, a couple years ago, due to some budget restrictions, we had to postpone the adoption of our math materials. And knowing that we needed to get moving because the math materials we were using were not meeting our kids where they were at, we did do kind of a soft rollout. So there are some buildings that have been utilizing illustrative math for 3 years. And so we've been looking at those buildings, and we are seeing some really great growth in some specific subgroups that we're really trying to close that achievement gap within. So we're seeing some significant growth with our Black and Brown students, as well as our students that have IEPs. And so we're excited about what we're seeing there in those buildings that have utilized the materials over 1 year, and which would then allow students to have the background knowledge and building on those foundational skills. And so, we just continue to look at that. You are right, Director Lingo, that we only have 2 grades to look at it for growth because third year's the first year that they take the assessment. But we continue to dig into those pieces. I do feel as though if we continue to really think about our core instruction, which will, again, as Superintendent Degner said, come to at our next board meeting, focusing on when we have students for the longest periods of time, that's what we need to continue to work on and improve and put our efforts. I use this analogy with our principals all the time of, like, we have this whirlwind where just these things just have to happen all of the time. But what we sometimes find ourselves getting into as educators is trying to do all the things at the same time really well. That's also called impossible. And so what we've been really focusing on is pulling things out of the whirlwind, letting the things that have to happen continue to go, but focusing on these pieces because of some legislative pieces and best practice of what we knew at that time. That was our intervention system. And so our teachers, I have 100% confidence in them that they can see a student's assessment score, determine what additional diagnostic screening assessments they're going to do to find skills in the skill where a student's most deficit and work on that and intervene. We need to put that back in our whirlwind and pull out the core and really focus on those high leverage strategies and focusing with HRS level 2 on those effective teachers in every classroom and using those instructional practices that we know are great with high quality materials and that guaranteed and viable curriculum that we're getting into with level 3. We do feel like we're moving in the right direction, and this data has helped us to be able to do that. Hard thing is we have to wait until next year to see if our efforts are making a difference. So that's why we've been trying to make some alignment so that we can look at things formatively and just in time so that we're not waiting for these 1 year pictures, these 1 year snapshots to let us know if we made it or not.
Yes, this may be one more for Superintendent Degner. When does the ISASP test open, and when is the last day that students have to have it completed by, typically?
It's in the spring now. Carmen, do you know the window for this year?
Yes.
Is it April?
Opens right before spring break, and then it closes right at the end of the month of April.
When do we typically have, because one of the things that, especially when you get into the 4-day school week literature, not that I'm saying that I want to go that way, but one of the things that they talk about is that the total amount of minutes that students spend in the classroom is what matters more than anything else, right? So when it comes to doing well on these tests, it's in the literature, and I'm just wondering, do we push out as far as possible to get students as much time in the classroom before we take these tests?
We typically test the second week of the window. That allows then 2 weeks after to look at any makeups or any type of support we need to provide with students. So that's typically what we've done within our system is the second week.
We wait until right towards the end. So
Okay.
we have like a week and a half before it closes.
Then it's typically, they test over the course of either 3 or 4 days within that week.
Because to get that 95% participation rate, we need to give ourselves that buffer just in case a student was ill or unable to take that. Or sometimes, takes us a little time to convince them that they can do it.
It's fair.
And the hard part with the window when it usually falls is it's not great to do it right after spring break. So that leaves, that's 5-6 week window down to really 4. And really you got to plan for the last 2 weeks of the window to make up. So you've really got 1 week to do it. So.
Yeah. Thank you for right now. That's.
Hi, Lucas.
Hello.
I just have a few questions. They're really easy. Thank you for the presentation.
Is that a question?
Not yet, because I didn't have a question mark at the end of the sentence.
Oh.
So the starting with this slide 13, the numbers, is that like a hard score taken off of the 400, 500, 700?
Yeah, so that's taking a look at their total index score out of 700. This just shows, it doesn't break it down by domain. It just looks at their total overall index score.
And I just wanted to make sure I understood that, because I see that, I always look at Penn, because that's where my kids are. It dropped, but it still stayed at that commendable level. So I just wanted to make sure I understood what that meant. Can we go to the next slide? As I understand it, right, if you get targeted, you automatically drop a level.
Correct.
So every school on here that has a parentheses actually scored a notch above.
Correct.
All right, and then my last question, see, I told you these were easy.
These are easy so far.
I know, I told you they were going to be easy.
And here's
If you're targeted for 2 groups, do you drop 2 or
Just
you
one.
just one?
Just
Okay.
with one. I think we had 2 buildings maybe that had targeted in 2 or more groups, but yeah, there's still only dropped 1. And what you'll see, I did not do a great job of explaining this, that parentheses is either their first targeted year 1 or targeted year 2.
But I mean, so as I read this, so Liberty and West are actually scoring as high-performing high schools, but because they're targeted, they're dropped down to the commendable.
Yep.
I mean, that's really impressive.
And that was the conversation today, is like, Lucas, we're going to get high performing next year. Fantastic. I'd love to see that. So yes.
We've given a considerable amount of feedback to the Department of Education about that strategy, about dropping a whole school's performance ranking based on the performance of one subgroup, and it's been met with deaf ears.
And the wording's not great either, right? Acceptable, like nobody takes kindly to, like, you're acceptable. Like I'd love to change the category names too, but they are what they are.
Well, I would assume that the more urban schools are more often targeted than the non-urban schools, and so perhaps the Department of Education has a policy reason in insisting that you automatically drop a subgroup. But I mean, I'm just hypothesizing. What do I know?
Thank gosh, that's not a question. Thank you. That's a statement from you.
That
Thank
is
you.
a statement. That's not
Thank
a question for you, Lucas.
Thank you for the presentation. I do have a question. Remind me again, Director Proctor, when do we get the universal screening data that we'll be able to review? Because again, this is just based off of one standardized test that all of our kids take.
Yeah. So we have our fall screening data because that window closed at the end of September. And so we're digging into that right now. And then we take it again in the winter and the spring. And so we we provide an update to you regarding just on the FAST is the assessment system that we use. And we provide that to you in the APR and the annual progress report and the teaching and learning. But we are, again, talking about how much this keeps us up at night, like we're creating a whole different data review process, and we're actually looking at that as a district level team, and then going in individually supporting buildings in terms of what they need based off of that data. Our buildings are looking at that a lot in terms of how that connects and relates to ISAS to see if there's some connection and correlation there. But we do have that data right now.
I just want to return to the observation that Mitch offered about the possible effect of RAM, our RAM method of staff assignment might have on these elementary school results. And I'm just going through, looking at this graph on here at the table, and I'm not quite seeing that a real convincing argument that our use of RAM is might be having a major effect upon whether or not schools' year-to-year change is positive or negative. But that's something we could, I assume, fairly readily measure.
Yeah, I think we could come back with seeing if there's a larger correlation. You know, I know there's probably some specific examples that speak to the point, and there's other some specific examples that wouldn't speak to the point as much. I do think as we approach the spring with you, strategy we're very interested in pursuing is RAM by grade level at school rather than just looking at the school, because of as we've continued to implement RAM and learning more from our staff and working with our building leaders, understanding that fourth grade at one building may present a different level of challenge that isn't spoken for in the whole need of looking at that campus. And so trying to, laser, kind of take a laser approach to that and staff accordingly, I think sets us up for some better success too. But I think there's always something for us to learn about how we allocate our resources. That's, as you heard Lucas talk about, resource allocation review, about where are we putting resources. We agree with that philosophy and think we should be looking at that for sure. I think the one final comment I'd make about this that seems like it's always glossed over, but it's just, I think, a little bit mind-blowing to educators is the fact that we're measured on assessment that we're not sure is aligned to the standards we're asked to teach. Mm-hmm. And so we're spending all this time talking about the scores and outcomes and the data, and until what Lucas shared here recently about an additional level of data or look for that they're going to be able to show to us, we're not sure that the standards that we've said are important to teach are actually what's being assessed on and that we're being measured on. I mean, it just doesn't seem to add up or make sense, but we're ranking and rating all of our schools throughout the state of Iowa without that direct alignment. So that is something I think we need to continue to think critically about and push for. I know the department's interested in trying to make some movement on that, but for us to talk about those results and not have that degree of confidence seems also like we're asking people to spin their wheels a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd still like to see it because, Hoover last year, 3 sections of 27 in third grade, 2 sections of 28.5 in fifth grade. Twain had a section of 28 and a section of 31. I'm looking at the fall enrollment numbers. It's scattered like that throughout plenty of buildings in our elementary schools where that is, and I'll sit and defend a teacher on that one. A classroom of 31 and trying to build growth in students, and that's a lot of different needs in one classroom when I think of when you're really getting into 4th and 5th grade where you have so many varying abilities at that point. It just grows over time. We all know that. But that's why I get focused on growth more than anything else, because it is the most equitable measure that we have of test scores. Because it takes a student and what their score is this year and compares it to their score the following year. Or this school year's score will be compared to last school year's score, and it will compare that student on other students that had a similar score somewhere else in the state.
Yeah, but
so if this is a policy discussion, that proficiency versus growth Proficiency is always going to be the most inequitable measure. Growth is going to be the most equitable because it's comparing the student from where they're at right now with other students where they're at right now at that same ability level. But I just, when I think of a teacher having to sit in a classroom with 29 students, 31 students, I don't know how they can really differentiate instruction in that many, to that many fourth or fifth graders.
It's just tricky, right? Because 29 students in one class could feel a certain way, and 24 students of another makeup could feel a very different way, right? And so that's why it's always so nuanced in what that actual end number is and trying to quantify that. And there's limitations to the RAM, right? It's of course not perfect, and even how we decide some of the weighting stuff, I think, could generate some of the questions about what makes the model work or doesn't work. But I think you're right, Director Lingo. I mean, there's some good questions to ask us in there, because I do think that's the important thing. Like, our job from a policy perspective should be, are we maximizing the amount of resources we have in the most effective way to see our kids grow? And so I don't think there's anything wrong with that conversation. It's just also understanding we are in a limited resource environment when we're looking at that.
Director Williams?
Well, and I think the type of student in the room matters, right? So, like, let's use Penn again, because you mentioned large class sizes there, but I'm looking at our RAM report. Penn has a 1.3% ELL rate, right? So most classes at Penn don't have an ELL student. But then when you scroll up and you look at Grant Wood, they have a 26.6% ELL rate, which means 1 out of every 4 kids on average in every classroom at Wood is an English language learner. And so that's a lot more challenging for a teacher to have, a class of 24, you're gonna have 6 kids who are ELL, than a class of 26 at Penn with 0. So I think like size is a part of it, but the type of kids that are in the classroom are really important when we're looking at what a teacher has to do. I mean, it's all tough. That's why I don't teach, but.
Thank God.
So I just want to jump, and so this chart that's up here, I appreciate Director Williams, pointing out that these are like the hard numbers on that score, and I don't think this up and down is weird. Like, I think that's perfectly normal. It's 2 years of data of 2 different sets of students. Some are going to go up and some are going to go down, and that's perfectly normal. The one that I would like to see improvement on when we talk about this the next time is the lovely chart with all the little bubbles of all the little elementary schools. We have far too many on the left side of that line. That needs to be better. Some schools are going to go up and some are going to go down because there's just different kids being tested. But I think we want to take all of our little elementaries and generally move them over to the right. And that's the improvement I would want to see, next time we're looking at this. That's all.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you so much. That takes us to tonight's action item. Sorry, excuse me, which is the 200 policies from Policy and Governance. Is there any comments before I call for a motion? Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the 200 series policies as presented.
Seconded.
All right, Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up, did any directors want to highlight items that they took part in under their director liaison reports?
I would like to highlight, I may not have been at Run for the Schools on Sunday, but I was helping a friend named Seymour. He's the Longfellow Longhorn throughout the event, off and on. But Seymour he told me that he had a very good time that day. He was one of only 2, he was kind of disappointed though. He's disappointed that he was only one of 2 mascots at the Run for the Schools. And he would like to challenge especially the secondary mascots to be at the Run for the Schools event next year. Because I know it's Louis, the Little Hawks attendance zone, and Louis probably should have been there, but Seymour, the Longfellow Longhorn, would like as many mascots to be there. And, there is like a break time. Maybe he thought maybe a quick 100-yard dash between the mascots to keep the kids entertained while we're waiting on the 5K. Maybe the superintendent could be in that 100-yard dash, or one of his subordinates could be his second. But Seymour had ideas, and he told me a lot about them afterwards to just get more mascots there.
You know what I'd throw out there is they tried to get my youngest daughter in the Penny the Panther mascot, and she said it smelled so bad that she refused to be the mascot at the first all-school assembly. So maybe we could get some money for dry cleaning the mascot costumes, and then we would see greater mascot participation at the Run for the School.
I was going to say, we did, there were several of us we put ourselves at the finish line cheering crew. And we did have that conversation of how fun it would be to just have as many mascots as you can. I will tell you, it's really hard to get people to want to get inside that costume. It is hot. You cannot see very well in a lot of them. So the 100-yard dash may end up with some kind of workman's comp. I don't think they would like that. And they do smell atrocious. But I think that is a goal of ours. I will let Superintendent Degner decide which one he's going to get inside. But
Don't pick Penny the Panther. I'm just telling you, I have inside information that it's awful.
I want to admit, so, yeah.
fans, though. The newer ones do have fans.
Oh.
Seymour took exceptional pride in his smell, so he was fine.
Is it Zeus at Liberty?
Yep.
That one wasn't too bad because it was still relatively new when I was in there.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Okay.
Duly noted on the request.
There
Tell
you
Seymour
go.
thank
I'll
you.
let Seymour know.
Yes, thank you.
Any other items the directors would like to highlight? That takes us to agenda setting for our meetings that will be on October 28th. First up will be policy and governance that will start at, well, it says 5, but it should be 5:30.
I think we decided 5 at the last meeting because there's a lot on.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Quite a bit to
I
discuss at
see.
PNG, so I expect to see you there, President Malone. It's going to be a thrilling meeting for all directors.
Thank you, Director Williams. The discussion items are listed for that policy and governance meeting. Again, that starts at 5 o'clock in the back of the room. Then we have our regular meeting that will take place at 6 p.m. that night. Education showcase. Do we know what we're showcasing that night?
We have Northwest Middle School will be here, and they're going to highlight some of their work to reduce suspensions.
Nice, okay. And we will have 300 series policies and maybe the 203 R1.
We'll definitely want to discuss it at the board
Okay.
table. We won't be ready to vote because it'll just be the first discussion.
right.
Yeah.
And discussion items, Superintendent Degner, from my computer.
Yeah, so I
froze.
believe we'll have a couple action items, some SBRC requests for modified supplemental aid approvals for ELL and special education. We have those in the draft agenda. We referenced tonight, we'd come back and talk to you about core instruction and some of the things that Eliza was sharing with you. It seems like it would also make sense to provide you an enrollment update with a little bit more information at that meeting. So we'll also include that in there as well. I think you mentioned Ed Showcase 200.3 R1 already. And then following, we would propose a follow-up work session on continuum of services that evening as well. So we'll try to keep the regular meeting agenda fairly light so that we can get to the work session in good shape. But we'd like to follow up on some of the items we had mentioned during the last board meeting we had and update you on progress.
Good. Director Lingo?
When are we gonna discuss enrollment?
I said that we would try to do an enrollment update there at
yeah,
that
I
meeting.
missed
That's
that.
all right. Yep.
When do they certify our count?
Tomorrow,
Yeah.
15th is when it gets cleaned up. Yep.
Are
We're
there-
still, although by saying tomorrow, I just logged on there before we got in here, and we're still waiting on some open enrollment data to come in from other districts, and then I would say the ESA data is still not complete either, so it's supposed to be tomorrow.
Okay. Are there any items that directors would want to put in the parking lot? Or if you don't have them tonight, you can feel free to email Superintendent Degner or myself or Vice President Abraham? All right. And that takes us to adjournment.
Are
No.
we not having an ed committee meeting next Tuesday?
No,
No.
we're a district closed day, so we're not doing a due ed committee on the 21st.
Oh, wow, that's a surprise for childcare. Thank you for letting me know.
Okay. That takes us.
And I'm sorry, President Malone, the board work session that's scheduled for the October 28th, that's on our planning?
Yes,
Is that right?
because Superintendent Degner mentioned that tonight, that we would, that's a continuation of the conversation we
Okay.
started at our last board meeting on the continuum of services.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
Anything else? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.